This is my flight review of the RTW fixed-wing flight controller. I flew it on a modified Easy Glider that I added landing gear and a top-mounted motor to, and it's 4 channels, standard setup, aileron, elevator, rudder, and throttle, so I was not using any of the special mixing that's available for VTOL or flying wing-style aircraft. So I only tested this under 3 flight modes. That was manual, horizon, and return to home. Under manual mode, it's just like flying a remote control plane with nothing in there. It's just like a straight pass-through from your receiver, but if you have wing mode for your airframe, or if you have set to a VTOL airframe, it will automatically perform mixing. So on your radio, you only need to set up standard 4-channel straight elevator, rudder, aileron, and throttle. Don't apply any mixing on your radio. That all happens through the flight controller. Also, any sub-trims that are needed, do that through the flight controller also. Don't try to do trims through your radio, because that will cause problems when you're changing flight modes. I had some decent winds today when I was flying, and had no problems with return to home. It did drift a little bit in the wind, but it corrected and it brought itself back when it was on the upwind leg of the circle. When I was in return to home mode, I found that throttle commands did not have any effect. The flight controller takes over the throttle channel and it sets it based on the speed that you entered for the return to home speed. If the speed is too low, the aircraft will not fly fast enough and you'll end up with a stall. So make sure that you get that speed high enough. I would suggest testing it on your first flight, go into return to home with plenty of altitude, and just make sure you're flying fast enough to not lose altitude. Once I got a little more comfortable with this system, I found that I could launch in horizon mode because it really was much easier than manual mode. And then once I got some altitude, I could kick it over into return to home, put on the goggles, and then go back into horizon mode for flying through the goggles. It does have a really decent self-leveling, but it does take a little while. I found that when I put an input, if I rolled it hard to the right or the left, or if I pitched it hard up or down, it took probably about a second before it really finished rolling back, maybe half a second. It seemed like it took a little while. As long as you've got a little bit of altitude, there's nothing to worry about. You can always pull hands off and it'll level right out. Having a gimbal on my plane, I found I really enjoyed being able to fly in horizon mode, because what that allowed me to do was pick a heading and essentially not think about how I was flying the plane and just look around and see what was out there. I want to give a description of everything that you see on the OSD screen here. It's all listed in the manual, but some of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. On the top left, you've got the flight mode. You can tell I'm changing as it'll change from horizon to manual to RTH. And right below that, you've got flight time. That's in minutes, and it's time since battery was plugged in. Just to the right of that, still at the top, it'll show armed. If it is not armed, you'll see that there as well, it'll tell you. On the far top right, you've got the RSSI. Right in the very middle, you've got the artificial horizon, and just above that you've got the compass telling you which direction you're pointing. It's fairly accurate. I think mine's off by probably about 10 degrees, but close enough. There's an arrow kind of moving around the artificial horizon, and that's supposed to point towards your home direction. On the left-hand side, you've got ground speed, supposedly. I believe this is calculated by the GPS. That would be in kilometers per hour, I think. On the right-hand side in the box is altitude, again calculated by GPS. I don't know if there's a barometer on this. And right below that box that has the altitude, that number that kind of stays around 0 most of the time, that is the climb speed in, again, I think kilometers per hour. down along the bottom you've got some useful information. On the far left there's 3 pieces of information relating to the battery. That's the amount of battery capacity used in milliamp hours, the voltage of the battery in real time, and the current being used in real time. And these are all fed into the flight controller through the battery connection system. I bought this from BangGood with version A, which comes with the battery connection, and they call it a BEC. It's a lot more than that. And it also came with the GPS. Speaking of GPS, to the right of all the battery information, you can see a little satellite icon and a number under that. That's your number of satellites that are being picked up by the GPS at any given time. To the right of that are 2 numbers. I'm not sure what the top one is. The manual calls it excessive health. Below that, you've got the throttle percent that's being commanded. You can tell when I'm in horizon mode, most of the time I'm flying at pretty high throttle settings. I could probably fly at slightly lower throttles, but I just felt more comfortable having that extra power if I needed to climb. On the far bottom right, you've got distance from home. This is in meters, and it does seem to go up as I get further away. I'm not sure exactly how accurate it is, but it seems pretty decent. After I had become a little more familiar with this system, I found that I really enjoyed taking off and landing in horizon mode. It just kept things so straight and level and easy. I almost didn't even have to think about it. Overall, I really liked this system. It was cheap, it was easy to set up, and it just worked. Take a look down in the description for links to the RCGroups thread on this flight controller, as well as a link to where you can buy it. Thanks for watching.